Welcome, everybody. I'm Wes Warren. I'm here with Greg Stanley from Whitehall Management. Today, we're going to be talking about, I would say, a very popular topic for our older dentists, ones that are even thinking about transitions. We're really going to try to lay out all the different options you have for transitions and how you transition out of practice. And then we're going to talk a little bit about investing. For years, Greg has really been a leader, I would say, in the industry on investing and talking about how to manage your money. So we're going to touch on that because definitely times have changed. And as you enter retirement and get close to it, you don't want to make some major mistakes. So that's really the topic today. So again, thank you for joining us. And Greg, tell us a little bit about what you see doctors facing as they want to transition. What are the challenges that a lot of doctors have?
Thanks, Wes. One of the big ones is here they are. They've gotten older. They don't know how they got there, but they're there. And they found themselves in a world that they never knew before. They don't know being old. They don't know the financial markets of our time. They're looking at pandemics. The real estate market, believe it or not, is up, as is the stock market, even though the financial outlook for the nation, as it just racks up unimaginable debt. So they're seeing all these things that are kind of new. And, we're talking about people that are 70 years old seeing things they've never even dreamed of. And so that's what we want to look at. We want to look at, too, some of the financial philosophies that have gone around for years, because some people are wondering, well, does this still apply? Does that still apply? Right. Let's take a look at it. And it's not that we know everything or that we can see the future. One thing that's clear about the future is that it's not clear. So let's talk about that. So what's in your future? What kind of retirement options are available? We're going to talk about that. Probably one of the biggest questions is, what do I do with my money? Whether you got a great deal or very little, you still wonder, should I be as concerned about it as my broker is, or as the brokerage world is? Because these seem to be able to talk about nothing else. And so you find yourself caught up in that worry that if I would take some incredible risk, I might get 2% instead of 1%. That's the kind of thing that gets talked about. So I think we'll be able to today put all that in perspective.
Okay.
Going to be several choices you're going to get. Bonds, we talked about that at one time. That was the big deal. Keep it in cash, put it in precious metals, stocks, real estate. Those are the ones that everybody talks about. Now, what we're really finding, the truth is, the deep, dark truth is that in time, any one of these tends to be good. It's like a clock that's right twice a day. One will be good for a while, then it's not. Another one, and then it's not. And so it's like playing musical chairs, and you don't want to be caught without the chair. Or the one that's left is on fire or something like that, which you don't want. So where do you put your money? We're going to talk about that. One thing is, if you're lucky, if you keep it in cash, you still have it. Granted, with the government now printing money by the trillions each month, adding trillions to the debt, that money may be less valuable. But that doesn't mean that something else will go up proportionately. Fortunately, right at this moment, precious metals have started to move. Real estate is moving, as is the stock market. But those can turn on a dime. We just had a pandemic, terrorist attacks, the things that can happen in what we call the equity markets, where you own assets. Hope that more people will want to buy them in the future. Uncertainty of what can happen in those things is pretty much off the chart. So for now, let's talk about you and your cash. In other words, let's say you've got $1 million saved. So now it becomes about, what do I do from here? Well, one of the things we're going to talk about, it's going to come up very clearly, is don't let go of your source of cash, your source of income, too soon. Financial markets can be so affected by things that now are not off the table. Pandemic, just when we thought we were through the pandemic is actually when it got going. Right now, it appears to be subsiding in a good way, and we're very thrilled about that. But there's so much uncertainty. Is the government going to keep printing money? Who's going to be in office? And you know what it looks like is it doesn't seem to really matter who's in office. We're in a situation where you got to print money one way or the other. I mean, we stop printing money. We're looking at really, it's the unthinkable. And here you are about to retire, just when you thought it was safe to leave practice. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. If you're listening, do not walk away from your practice while you're still able to work, earn. One of the things we're going to talk about before this is over is how you can stay around longer. Let's look at some of these things. Talked about natural disasters. There's also what I call unnatural disasters, like things that we actually do to ourselves. Recession, cost of healthcare seems to be unstoppable. When people from other countries see what we pay for healthcare, both for the insurance and for an actual trip to the hospital, they almost tear up. It's so shocking when they hear the numbers. This is really becoming a reality to you just at the time you're thinking of cutting off your supply of income. And some of you are wondering, well, I have a few assets. I have a home and I have an office. And where will the market be when I need to sell those? My advice is if your children are gone, get yourself in a home you can stay in well into retirement. As far as the office goes, we'll talk more about that in a minute. We want to look at a plan that'll keep your income flowing and at the very worst, get the most for your practice. Yeah, what if you get disabled? What if you get divorced? Again, more unnatural disasters. It's sad because we think of those things as happening to other people, but Tiger Woods is talking about now whether or not he'll ever be able to play golf again. I'm sure he has a few dollars put away, and I'm sure in a wheelchair he could beat me on my best day. But let's face it, these things happen, and probably one of the cruelest unnatural disasters is just getting old. Not only is it the cruelest, it's the surest. Look in your photos on your phone and you look at how you looked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and look at yourself now and go, wow, I look awful. No. Wait till you see yourself 10 years from now. You'll really think you look awful. So that's a situation that fortunately death cures. Getting old isn't cheap. You can end up in a home. You can end up with your kids. You'd probably rather end up on the street, but any number of things can happen. So let's look at your retirement vision and let Wes and I show you some new possibilities, some things you don't really think a lot about. When we talked in the past about municipal bonds, that was really revolutionary. Yeah, people knew about bonds, but everybody thought, oh, I got the rest of my life. I can afford some risk. It just wasn't mainstream. And now looking back, during the time you could buy bonds at 8 to 10%, it was probably a pretty good idea, even though it wasn't mainstream. So we're going to introduce some things that could put you closer to probably where you want to be, and at the very least, lower your risk. So let's talk about your retirement vision and your choices.
So we're going to go over the main 4 options that any doctor has in retirement, and there are only 4. And there's variations of each of these, but it's nice to know your options and decide which one's the correct one for you. Probably the most straightforward one is to just sell and walk away. This is where you get a broker or you find somebody that wants to buy your practice and you sell it to them. And you walk away typically pretty quickly. 60 days is not out of the question. The transition happens really fast and you're out and they step in. I would say, Greg, for the most part, I would say that practices are selling, depending on the practice, it can range wildly in terms of what they sell for. It can be for the charts, $50 a chart, and it can go all the way up to 70, 80% of last year's gross. You see those kind of numbers thrown around all the time, But there are some risks here, Greg. What are some of these risks?
Let's talk about that. A lot of people don't know the risk they're bringing on themselves when they do some of these things. So we're going to talk about what really determines whether you get $50 a chart, or I've seen it for $10 a chart, by the way,
Okay.
all the way up to, I've even seen it go as high as 100% of last year's gross.
That's right. Yep.
And so let's really look into the heart of that. Kind of comes down to what you're selling. If you've let it wither on the vine, you just let it die off. You know, here's an example. A lot of doctors today who've withered their practices, they don't even have a website. If they do, it's some kind of brochureware that's got pictures of their staff that used to work for them 12 years ago. And they haven't seen them since. They're just completely out of date. Now, they got a handful of people that love them, but there's fewer and fewer of them, if for no other reason than they move or die. And so that's a dwindling group of people, get smaller and smaller, and the office is in the process of dry rotting. I've actually seen this happen where the baseboards fall off the wall. The acoustics tiles fall from the ceiling. The hand pieces cease working in their hand. You know, it's like all bad. And
Right.
then they go, okay, let's sell this thing, you know, like they're going to get a bunch of money from it, especially after they listen to some of these DSOs and these various people talking about getting 20 times earnings and all of this. Some of these practices, if I can say it, if I'm allowed, you can't even sell them.
A lot don't sell.
There's a percentage that don't sell at all. Probably two classes of practices don't sell. One is the doctor that stayed too long. They didn't reinvest. They're not up to the times, and nobody wants something that's completely busted. The flow is down to next to nothing. Even the known staff have retired or died or moved or whatever. The next category, Wes, is doctors that tried to open more than one office. Occasionally, somebody will try to do 3 or 4 at once, but somebody opens a second office, puts an associate in it, finds out there was some magic formula nobody ever explained to them. And it goes bad, and now they're working both offices, and they have a tendency to give one of them away. They start by saying things like, come and get it for the cost of the rent and things like that, cost of the equipment. In the end, they're just thankful if somebody will come and occupy the space. So those are two situations that lead to what I'm talking about, where you can't get anything for the practice. So you want it to sell, it needs to be robust. People that buy a practice, they want opportunity.
It needs to be growing. Any practice that's actually shrinking year by year, 2%, 3% negative growth, man, those are hard to sell.
Well, you know, it's hard to think or to be conscious that you're going to sell and see the practice grow. There's just something in you that doesn't want to put up with the abuse from staff and patients, that doesn't want to deal with the stress of staying up at night with certain problems and worries and all of that. So once you know you're going to sell, you have a tendency to leave before a bargain is struck. You leave mentally.
You take the foot off the gas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you want to sell a going concern, a practice that is really happening, you can sell that. And you'll get so much money for it that it'd probably make you stop and wonder, should I be selling this? It's a good question. You know, when you really have that practice in high gear, it's paying so well, you don't really want to sell.
You don't get the return back. Yeah.
No.
Definitely.
And you never do. In fact, that was one of the things we learned when the people were going around the country overpaying for practices. Remember that?
Yeah.
The groups. When you did the math, somebody that had another 20 years that they could work in practice, and they would sell a practice for 4 or 5 million, and they're making $1 million a year, they really ended up having their life crimped down financially.
This one really, you got to be careful that the practice doesn't stagnate. It's got to be growing. You got to be reinvesting. You got to act like you're a 40-year-old still in terms of how you treat your practice, or else you will not get top dollar for it.
I think if you're stagnating, it's hard to not let it creep into everything around you. You see changes going on in dentistry, thinking to yourself, I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't do this, I'll do that. And you just get left behind.
Definitely catches doctors off when they stop reinvesting, when they stop wanting to go and learn new things, spend more money on marketing and keep the practice, kind of at at least 2 or 3% growth per year. Once it slides and you start losing ground, that's where you run the risk of losing massive amounts of resale value.
Here's a problem too, just like a fish swimming upstream. If you probably feel like that at times. Imagine that stream gets twice as swift. Well, as you get older, that's tough to keep swimming. For a doctor, for example, if you decide to quit taking insurance, it's just like that water starts going really fast. And you got to be able to really stroke and swim and keep up. And so those of you who have cut the tie with insurance, you're not participating, and you get older, it takes more energy, more charisma, more everything to keep making progress. Granted, it's great that you don't take insurance. There's probably another 10 or 20% of profit in that for you, but life gets harder and harder, and you're getting older and older. It's better that you learn how to get old gracefully, how to stay in control as you age. So that's sell and walk away.
Okay.
Let's look at another one. Let's talk about selling and staying in practice, because a lot of people have already thought through some of these things. In fact, we at times would have people speak at seminars about transitions, selling practices. I was always amazed, no matter how bad the speaker was or how good they were, the interest in the topic was off the chart. Everybody was wondering, when can I quit? Have I got enough to quit? When will I have enough to quit? And so they think through it, and they kind of conclude, I guess it's not good yet. And so they come up with other options. And this is one of them. I'll sell the practice to someone else who would obviously see the value of me staying in the practice and being awesome and doing my implants or whatever I'm doing. And so I'll sell it, get a chunk of money, and then I'll keep an income coming in. Wes, I'd like you to talk about that.
Yeah, I would say that this is probably a fallacy that is just out there, that this marriage is going to work. It doesn't work. Occasionally we see it work, but I mean, man, it's actually very rare that we see it actually work out.
But people actually do it, but they don't stay with it. That's
right. They able to do it, and they're able to sign the documents. They're able to get the cash, but the whole idea of you sticking around and making an income, they'll make your life so miserable you will hate it there for various different reasons. Some of it's just they're tired of hearing how great you are from the staff. They're tired of hearing how great you are from the patients. And the other part of it is they're looking at what you're producing. They come in, they underproduce, and they look at what you're producing. They think that you're taken from their pocket, and they want you out of there real quick. I would say a year and a half, most of our people end up leaving the situation.
Right. So people will sign things. They'll say, yes, you can stay, and we'll give you 25, 30, 35%, whatever. But like you said, they get tired of hearing your virtues extolled. They want you gone, and they don't have to fire you or break the contract. They just have to make you miserable.
Make you miserable.
And they come up with ways to do it.
Yeah. And so that's the norm there. The other side of this is the sell and stay, is where you go with private equity. You go with DSOs and you sell out to a DSO and they manage the practice for you. And you have to work, I've seen it between 2 and 5 years, depending on the deal you work out. Mandatory to stay, they hold money back, all this goofy stuff. Our doctors that have done that, I would say around the 80 percentile level, don't like the situation. They don't like how it's being run. There's turnover of staff, good team members, they don't want to pay anymore. They're changing bonus system structures. I would say it's very much a negative for most of our
Yeah,
doctors.
they tell you that all you have to do is stay and keep doing what you're doing. What
Right.
they don't say, but it's in the contract, is keep doing what you're doing in a completely different environment.
That's right.
Bonus, different staff, different prices, all sorts of things.
And the other thing that I'll point out, what I'm seeing now is they're holding back quite a bit of cash. And when you do the math over, I've seen deals that they stretch you out 5 years where you have to stay with the practice. You'd have made more money just owning the practice over that 5 years than actually selling it. The math just doesn't work on a lot of these deals that I'm seeing lately. So if you're interested, I'll definitely take phone calls on this. If you want to walk through the numbers, you got an offer and you kind of are done with managing a practice, I would definitely like to walk through the numbers with you to make sure you're getting a fair deal, because most of them you're not.
Bottom line is, there is a threshold we all have when we're offered a chunk of cash.
Yeah.
Even though some of it's down the road, that chunk, they'll keep talking about the whole chunk, not the part they're offering to you up front.
That's right.
And there's a number where we finally go, you got me. Okay, let's do this. And you end up unhappy and ultimately underpaid.
Yeah.
So selling and staying, can I give you an alternative? Sell, but don't sell enough to give control.
Stay and slow down, insert an associate, kind of keep the practice rolling. There's two options here, really. The old Whitehall option of retire and practice, stay and slow down, knowing that the practice is going to retract.
Exactly.
And you're good with it. The other thing you can do here is stay and slow down, but insert an associate in. Kind of keep the practice propped up, keep the production going. And this you could definitely, like Greg's saying, you could sell out a portion of the practice to that associate if they work out.
You don't sell them 51% or 50%.
Right. You're still the majority.
You have to have control. See, like Wes was saying, it's going to work more than likely, if you don't get a real toxic associate, because you're there to kind of keep the culture in place, how patients are treated. Sometimes people that are new to dentistry don't even know what they don't even know.
Or new to owning a practice. Things to be careful here. So we're in the realm that we specialize in, adding an associate at this point. So the first two options, really, they're kind of straightforward. This one gets complicated because you have to have some systems in place that ensure an associate chances of working out are very high.
Can you just allude to some of those?
Sure. So a couple of the big issues is patient flow, meaning you got enough patient flow to support yourself, but really not enough to support an associate. And heck, if you could have figured that out, I'd have been busier 20 years ago. And, it's not so easy to just say, hey, you need more patient flow. There are some tricks here that you have to have figured out in patient demand, patient retention, and making sure that the practice has enough to support both of you. I would say in the majority of our phone calls that we do, Greg, I would say 60-70% of the practices actually have enough patients to support an associate. But the other side of it is case development. This is the area that most of our associates really struggle with. And I would say on average, their case development will be 1/3 of the owner. So you take patient flow that an owner that we work with produces $100,000 of restorative dentistry off, they'll produce 35. That's very, very common. And so we have to create systems inside the practice to offset that through the team and new patient development, that the load of case development gets spread out to the entire team, and it's not so much focused on an owner's or a doctor's gift with patients. That's what you have to create, and that's the secret.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit more. I thought you said it well. The patient flow is actually adequate, which you find quite often, but it's not adequate for, if I could use the term, a bumbling associate. Not all associates are bumblers, but if that's what you get, meaning they need a year or two of warm up, then you don't have enough. There's probably not enough in the world, they can burn through them.
It leads doctors to believe they didn't find the right person. And
Right.
there's this mindset out there in dentistry that I just didn't find the right associate. And that's my problem. I just got to find the right guy or the right girl. And that's absolutely the wrong type of thinking, because you're literally trying to find a needle in the haystack. Think of associate like a pie chart. And you're saying only 3% of associates will work out under my systems and my patient flow. And I just got to find one of those three, that 3% out of 100. What I'm saying is, if you create systems and structure inside the practice and you stretch that out to 30 or 40% of associates will work out. That's what you got to be thinking about, is what do we need to do and improve in this practice that will have more associates be successful here. And if you do that, the chances of you finding the right associate the first time off go up dramatically. We're at probably about 80% of our associates work out first time.
But when they don't, when associate doesn't work out, it's not pretty. Typically know by the 4th month if the associate is going to succeed. There's numbers that tell us that. Okay, let's look at the 4th option, what we call the sustainable posture, meaning you could switch to this at any age, early or late. You could be a younger doctor and maybe you're in your 40s, you want to spend more time with your family. You're in your 50s and you want to just be able to last longer. You're in your 60s and you want to slow down. This is the one. This is where you're going to bring associates in. And notice that was plural. You're going to bring associates in because it probably takes eventually several, at least 2. You don't want to count on one associate too long, because the more they start to produce and the less you produce going forward, the weaker the position you find yourself in. So we're happy to, a lot of associates are happy working 2 or 3 days a week. And so we'll have 2 of those. And so if somebody leaves, we survive it. So that's why I call it sustainable. In fact, the reason I call it sustainable is because we have doctors who do this who don't work at all.
Right.
They don't go to the practice. They produce through associates. They have leaders that we've trained and work with. Some of them produce $400,000 to $500,000 a month, and they're not lifting a handpiece. So we've done that enough times. You'd have a hard time arguing with us that it can't be done. Your best case is that you can't do it for some reason,
Right.
We know that it can be done. Are there risks? Not if you follow all the rules, and there's a lot of rules. Unforgiving, but it is predictable. So that's what we call the sustainable posture. In fact, we call it retiring with your practice, retiring in practice.
This is where doctors get tired of this treadmill that they're on. And, most of you don't want to quit completely, but you don't want to take longer breaks, longer vacations, have a lot more flexibility. And that's really what we work on here at Whitehall, is practices in this position where a doctor kind of wants it to run without them, if you will, where there's enough management in place that they don't have to babysit every little number and know that the place is still going to do well. And if they want to take a month off or a week off and travel, that they can, and it'll still make them money. All the way to the point where Greg was talking about, where you're not even working at all and it still makes you money.
I'm not an advocate of you not working at all. 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 2 half days a week, I don't care. A couple of things: mental health and skill set. keeps you mentally feeling good about the time off you take, a good sense of meaning and purpose in your life, and you still feel like you know how to be a dentist. Your skills are still sharp. In fact, you can spend a lot of your downtime learning new skills, more profitable skills. The treadmill, you can get off of that when you're ready to. You say, well, what about the risk? Well, what about the risk of staying on the treadmill until you can't work at all and everything's broken down? You don't feel like reinvesting. You kind of stayed on it too long. So ultimately, what we're talking about is a practice that can run without you.
Where you're not essential. Your presence isn't the key to making everything work and making sure that the practice hits its numbers. There's a lot of pieces that go to that, but once it's built, it really is a dream situation.
We talk about building an income machine. It sounds kind of greedy and commercialized, but in fact, that's kind of what it is. It's what everybody wants. The patients want the dentistry, the associates want the income, the staff want a great job, and you want a retirement. You put it together, it can work.
Tight practice sales market. Everybody worries about 4 or 5 years. What's the market going to look like? Am I better off selling now or should I hang on? What do you say about this?
Well, there was a time when the people with the money out there were walking around buying practices at ridiculous prices, high prices, and paying for them. Now they've gotten smarter and smarter. The prices they pay have gone down and down. And the terms are less and less attractive. But you ask a good question. What does the future look like? It's absolutely unknowable. Somebody was telling me the other day, and I don't doubt this, that the whole practice roll-up picture could implode. You know, these people rolling up practice, have 300 practices, 500 practices, and they get up to 22 times earnings. So the group's worth $1 billion or $2 billion or whatever. After that hits its peak, everybody gets their money and it's gone. That thing could unwind so fast, and the people that owned those practices could end up holding the bag because the people at the top, the roll-up people, they got the billions, you know, and you got nothing or very little. Somebody was talking about that like it's inevitable, and they believe it's inevitable, but they still want to be a part of it, thinking, as we often do, we'll know when to get out. So what's going to happen in that market? It's hard to say. I want you to know something, though. I believe that there will be, going into the future, real value in keeping your practice, not in selling it. Not that 5 years from now it's going to be worth more or less. You can't know that. But what you can produce through another dentist, that's kind of knowable. I think you can know that if you can manage an opportunity, really create an opportunity for them, people will show up to get it.
So what if I'm too late? You know, I'm a little old. We do run into this where doctors they've gotten too tired. Literally, that's their issue, is that they have gotten too tired, and having to think about all this and actually manage associate and bring up to speed. That's where we come into play.
Worry about getting too tired, but even more are worried about getting worried. They don't want to worry. I just want to sit tight.
That's where we come into play with helping doctors out to create a little certainty, and that they don't have to do all the heavy lifting. They just tell us, this is my vision. I want an associate. I want to go down to 2 days a week. And boom, we slip in behind the scenes. We make it happen. It's not about having the owner do a bunch of things, because they won't do it. They're too tired, really. I mean, to really go back in and dive in and try to build a practice, it's not going to happen.
Some of it goes backwards, though, as I was saying, where it's different than you think. For example, we might have a leader we put in place, and you'll be paying that person more than you've ever paid a person. You know, it depends on how much you've been paying people, but
Right.
That might be the key to everything. And that makes it all come together. And here you are, starting late, realizing I could have done this 10 or 20 years ago. I would go with Wes on that. These are things we've learned and we can teach them to you, or we can help you through it. Fight or fly. I sell it and walk away. And I'm not saying that's the worst thing in the world, because you can get a little Social Security, you get some Medicare, maybe another doctor will let you come in and check some hygiene or something. I don't know. But if you want to stay in this game, I say fight. Start where you're at. You don't have to go out and build out. You don't have to buy bigger. You don't have to go big or go home. You just have to stay in the fight. Clean your place up, learn your marketing, and start to increase demand. Like you see the fish on the picture there, more fish. We want more fish to follow us. Wards and Sears. There was a time this was told in every business college. When I was going to school in accounting, this was the great story. Most people don't even know what Wards, they were born after Wards was gone and the word was never printed again. The end of World War II, we were coming to what turned out to be the end of an incredible depression, unlike anything we've seen. And Wards was about like Sears, and they said the depression will continue after the war. And Sears said, no, we're going to come back and we're going to have prosperity. Wards bet on depression. Sears bet on prosperity. Sears won. Of course, they finally got eaten by Walmart and Amazon. That was later, many, many decades later. But it was a lesson. And I think we're looking at that one right now. Selling your practice, I tell you, I'm more concerned about you losing your skills, because we've seen this happen. Then you end up realizing, you know what? I was happier. My worst day in practice is better than my best day in retirement or whatever. I wish I could go back and still be part of that scene. Working with patients and staff, all of that. Don't lose your skills. Stay in this fight. You don't have to bring yourself to an early death. Just stay at it. And that's where Whitehall has a solution. Analyzing when you can retire, when you can slow down. I can tell you this, when you can retire and walk away, that's at least 2 years from the moment you embrace our associate philosophy. That's a minimum of 2 years. When you can slow down, that could be as soon as 90 days.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a cool thing. Here, Scott Sayer. He's no kid. His hair is as gray as mine if I had any. He's got a monster practice, and he's opening more practices. He's just doing great.
Right.
And he loves it. He thrives on the production. It's very profitable and incredibly enjoyable. See, so many people feel like they've just gone through some kind of hazing their 41 years in practice. And of course, they were all but dead when they got to the end. That's how most of our doctors feel now. They get to the end and they're going, my gosh, am I glad that's over? Well, you got to turn that around so that you're doing the kind of dentistry you want to do. You're doing as much of it as you want to do or as little. And you're having a life. It's kind of hard to have a life in COVID, but you want to have a life. You want to have a good life. Some travel, enjoyment. That's what I'm talking about. Here's another guy, Dr. Jim Michaels. He's 62, and he's just absolutely killing it and stoking up the fire. It's funny, him and Scott Sayer both probably have 20,000 hours in the air. They're pilots. They're incredible pilots. They can fly a practice too. Dr. Michaels has done just incredible production just by himself. Now he's bringing in associates, and he's stepping it up.
Dr. Hester in Oregon, same situation. Wanted to retire in practice, bring on associate, and really his was a great success. As soon as he hit the ground running with us, the practice zoomed up, brought in associates, and it just absolutely worked out great. So he's another success story. Let me talk a little bit about what we offer, our feasibility analysis. There's so many different questions and different things when you're talking about retiring in practice, transitions, how it all works. How do I find an associate? How do I pay them? Is my practice set up for it? Do I have enough operatories? Do I have enough hygiene? There's so much that goes into it that we definitely do what we call a feasibility analysis. We also look at any type of assets you have. We look at liabilities, profitability, practice valuation. We look at the net, and we give you a full analysis of what we think you have to watch out for on bringing on an associate. So for those of you that want an analysis, we'll offer it for free for the first 5 doctors who schedule. After there's 5, we won't take any more.
Yeah, don't be offended because we can't do hundreds of these at one time.
We just can't do a ton. Greg and I are pretty much booked. So we will take 5. So if you're listening, jump on and we will give you the real deal. We'll tell you exactly, we're not going to pull any punches. This is not about selling you into some huge, big, expensive program. We'll tell you what we think in the time that we have, and we'll talk about different options that we provide, but it's not a sales pitch. Believe me, we're here to help you guys. For those of you that do join, we have a couple special gifts for you. One is our A to Z hygiene recall system. This is hygiene coordination in a bottle, if you will. It is the best hygiene coordination system known to man. This is when to make phone calls, how to set up your text messages, what they should say, what happens if hygiene is falling apart, how to fix it. Everything that goes into creating the tightest hygiene appointment system on the planet. And we're looking at trying to create next to no holes in hygiene through this system. The other is our automatic case acceptance system. We talked about how big of a role getting case acceptance shifted to everybody on the team. This will definitely help you in that regard. Act now. The first 5 people will give that to you. No charge. Go to the link. You can call or you can email Lori and set it up. We'd love to talk with you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.